So today we're going to be doing Warcraft Workshop early. Our guest today is Nagura, and we're going to be speaking with her, and then I'm going to actually head off to my raid on EU and get my EU Evoker its first clear in Mythic. Fortunately, I was able to get my Evokers on EU and NA, both their 4-piece. So we're actually ready to cook. Very excited for that. The EU Evoker actually has its legendary already, so all I need to do is wait until next week to get the second bullion, and then I'll be getting my legendary upgrade, which is fantastic. But on NA, I still don't have my legendary, which means we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully I get lucky. If I don't, I might do something crazy again. We'll see. But either way, though, I'm sure it'll be fun. And then, obviously, been working on alts and stuff. I haven't really spent too much time on the Paladin, but I did get the Legendary on it, so it's ready to go. The EU one already has it. For those of you out there who are trying to use the Legendary and upgrade it, it's kind of insane the amount of upgrade materials you need to get that thing up. Like, I don't really understand why it's so expensive. So, like, just to give you an idea, because I feel like this is just insanity, right? So, like, let's say that you have Fairlat the Dream Render, right? And you're trying to get this thing up to item level 535, which is the highest item level you can get it, right? In order to get this thing upgraded to that point, you need to have like 3,700 flight stones. That's not even accounting for the crests, okay? That's just flight stones, because it's a two-hander, and the two-handed flight stone costs are crazy. And the cap is 2,000. That's almost double the cap. You need almost double the cap to get this thing up. So, yeah, I don't know what the hell Blizzard's thinking with this, man. It's crazy. Why are flight stones so expensive right now? Like, why didn't they reduce this with Season 4? It's crazy to me. But anyways, luckily we don't have to deal with this. Our legendary is a one-hander, which means it is much easier to upgrade it. Much cheaper. 7 Beta Bank says, hey, Preheat, I was wondering if it's a good time to come back playing WoW, or should I wait until the War Within? I think now is a great time. There's a lot going on. A lot of people are playing. You can experience all the fun things about the expansion without having to deal with all the other nonsense. Class balance is a bit abysmal, but it kind of depends on what class you're looking to play. So if you're looking to play right now in Season 4, I would recommend playing like an Evoker. I think Devastation is like the best spec right now in Raid. In Mythic Plus, it's a bit more nuanced, but in Raid, you'll definitely top the meters if you're geared up. I've been saying it. It is the Tier of the Dragon. The Tier of the Dragon this year. Yep. So definitely try it out. If you're looking to play Mage, you're probably going to end up playing Arcane right now. It looks like. But you can play Fire or Frost. It's fine too. It's just, I think Arcane like slightly edges them out. But yeah, Tier of the Dragon. Make sure you make an Evoker if you haven't already made one. Now is the time to do it, dude. Dragons are popping off. How's Fire Mage doing? Well, let's look at that. So if we look at Warcraft logs, right? I'm going to focus on Raid. Because in Mythic Plus, it's not so much about how much damage you deal. It's about what you bring to the table. And also how much damage you deal. So like having a Mage in a meta comp for Mythic Plus seems like a no-brainer because Intellect heals... or gives you more healing with the healer, right? So pretty much you're like looking at whatever gives you the best healing and best survivability for Mythic Plus. So stuff like AUG, stuff like Arcane Intelligence, those are huge. Stuff like Versatility, these are huge because they make it so that you can survive longer. And Mythic Plus isn't as much about the damage. I mean, damage is important, but it's more so just about like surviving the checks. There's a lot of checks that will like either kill you instantly or kill you really quickly that you need to beat. And you need to have your healer be as strong as possible. So I think a great example of this is if you're doing Halls of Infusion, you know the boss with the frost stuff that just ticks you for passive damage? Yeah, so like if you don't have int and like AUG buffs, that boss on the high key is just going to roast your party. You're just going to get roasted. There's no way you're going to survive that shit. So yeah, it's more so about just survivability. But in Raid, we can actually talk about the class balance a little bit better because all the buffs are kind of a given and it's a bit easier to digest. So right now there's a weird thing going on with the logs because if you look at the DPS overall, you're going to notice Devastation's lower, and the reason why is because a lot of these Devastation Evokers locked in their logs for the week on Mythic when the tier set was not fixed yet. There was a bug with the tier set that caused it to only deal 1/4 of the damage it should have. Effectively, this caused the tier set to become the worst tier bonus. And it was the best one. It is the best one right now. But it was the worst because you were only getting 1/4 of the value, right? So that was pretty bad. But if we go to Heroic, because people can just rerun it, right, you'll see a little bit of a different story. So you see a lot of Arcane Mages up there. Arcane's doing pretty well. You'll see MM Hunters popping off on Council. This is like a pure AoE fight. But you also see Devastation Evokers up there too. May not be as many because you have to play like a special build that I don't know if many of them know about. I do have it in my Wowhead guide though. So if you read the guide, you would know about the build. But a lot of Evokers aren't playing that build. I played the build myself and it was very strong. It's the Ever-Burning Flame build, Council build. You play Flamestorm or Firestorm. That's the only fight I would ever recommend playing Firestorm on. But if we look at statistics and we go to the highest percentile for Heroic, because Mythic was done mainly before Devastation locked in, you'll see here it's like Arcane Mage. Well, this is Heroic, so it's also shorter fights, so it's going to be hard to really compete with bursty classes. So you see stuff like Unholy and Arcane like pretty high up here. But yeah, in general, like you'll see in this raid I'm about to do, and you'll see in the logs like in the weeks to come, because next week the tier won't be bugged out. We'll be able to just do it normally. You'll see Devastation is doing much better. But some classes are having issues too. So Assassination actually had the same issue as Devastation. Only instead of it being on the tier bonus, it was on their abilities themselves that weren't scaling correctly. So I think a lot of them got bad logs because of that, but it seems like they're doing not great. I don't know. Maybe it's better now that they fixed the bugs. Who knows? It's hard to say. Yeah, but Int is just huge. Like in Mythic Plus, you want a mage. I don't know if it's a fire mage, but I feel like it probably is a fire mage. How's the learning curve for Evoker compared to fire mage? Evoker's way easier. Yeah, you can pick up Devastation pretty easily. I have videos on it. I have a Season 4 video I just put out if you want to go check that out. The only thing that's complicated about Dev is like, well, 2 things. So number 1 is Empowers. Number 2 is Disintegrate. And I have videos, or I have a video on Disintegrate specifically, and it comes with a weak aura. It's my red tick one. It explains clipping and chaining and all that good stuff. It's not really necessary though. We're talking about like 1% gains. It's super minimal. But the Empower stuff is just, you know, what Empower to use in which situations. Just knowing when you should Empower stuff up. The general rule is just like Fire Breath in AoE, max rank. Eternity Surge in Dragon Rage, rank 1. Eternity Surge outside of Dragon Rage, single target, rank 1. In AoE, you can rank it up. But the opportunity cost of Eternity Surge is like a little higher than it probably should be. So usually you just downrank that one. Oh yeah, and Priest brings Fort. I forgot to mention Priest, but Priest brings Fort. So that's another one. So it's like Fort versus Int Aug buffs. You get those 4 things, you're cooking. And then a tank that's like strong. So probably like a Vengeance Demon Hunter. Yeah, Fire Mage Alpha looks incredible. It looks so good. Yeah, so here's like the dungeons. So you can kind of see it's like not very balanced. Like I was saying, Aug buff, Mage buff, Burst buff, Fort buff, Demon Hunter damage buff, and tank is just OP. And you'll see mages sometimes play Frost too. Even Arcane as well. But that's pretty much the comp. I mean, we're pretty much locked in. This is the comp I was calling, by the way. Happy to report that I pretty much entirely called this comp, and it wasn't hard. You literally just look at the raid buffs. What raid buffs do these people bring? Right? You need all of them. If you bring the raid buffs, that last slot can just kind of like do whatever. It doesn't really matter. But as long as you have like 4 of the 5 of like Fort, Int, Verse, Aug buffs. I guess the last one would be Demon Hunter, but that one's not as important. It's just damage. You can substitute that out for other damage. But Demon Hunter tank is just too strong. So like you wouldn't sub that out. So yeah, everything came out exactly as expected. Until raid buffs change, this is just going to be how it is. Right? Because like they would have to balance things so hard for them to not choose this stuff. And you can swap dev I think as an AUG, you actually need to be able to play Dev. Because right now the meta is there's certain fights and certain trash pulls, certain instances in the dungeon where Devastation is just like way better. So what you do is you go Dev for those, and then you swap to AUG, and then you come back in. Yeah, you can bring Paladin for Dev Aura, but I mean, again, it's a lot of the juicy comp stuff isn't going to bring Paladin because you have to compare it against the classes it would replace, right? AUG, no shot. Mage, you've got Mass Barrier, you've got Int. You're buffing the healing output. You've got uncapped AoE. Priest, you've got Dispel, you've got Fade, you've got Mind Soothe, Mind Control, Fort Buff, VE, crazy single target damage where you have like AoE damage happening too just for free. It's like you can't, I mean, you could bring it in, but you're not going to compare on like a super high key. It's just not going to happen. They're just not designed to like be able to be at the same level. You can do it. Just know it's like slightly suboptimal. But the God spec is just the God comp's just a God comp, right? What can you do? It's all because of AUG, by the way. AUG is the problem. I'm just throwing it out there. AUG is the problem. It is the reason why this comp is so hard enforced. Without AUG, you would not have it be this strict. Because with AUG, you need someone getting PI'd, and that person needs to be a good PI target. So AUG pretty much forces the priest and the mage. And they're already forced, like without the AUG even, but at least without the AUG, then you have an extra slot, right? But with AUG, you have that slot filled. So it's over. It's fucking Jover. Yeah, AUG is the way. It's always going to be this way. Unless Blizzard changes something fundamentally. The damage tuning does not matter as much as the stuff that you're bringing to the key. And this is just going to be how it is until Blizzard realizes that this is a problem. And I've been saying it since before they even released AUG that this was going to be the problem. But I don't know, man. I guess they're just okay with us. It's crazy. Anyways, but you can play Dev. Dev is like really, really strong, I would say. Like just play Dev if you want to play Dev. If you want to push keys though, so like these are like equivalent to like 26, 27s, you're going to get roped into playing AUG. But you can play Dev at like, you know, any key level. It's just you're going to have your party force you or really, really hard pressure you onto AUG if you're going to this point where you're like doing 17s. It's going to happen. Speaking from experience here. Doesn't matter how good you are at Dev. It's going to happen. But playing both is best. Because there's a lot of instances where AUG is not good. But AUG is insanely good in other instances, so you need to be able to play both. Because you will play both in the key. You will not just play AUG the entire key in most cases. You probably swap it up depending on the boss, depending on the situation. There's going to be a lot of situations where you need to swap it around. Because, again, there are huge gains for having the evoker be able to go Dev. The amount of damage you can output as Dev is like insane. Dev has like such good damage, especially in single target. That's where you really want the Dev, is whenever you are on a boss where you don't need the AUG defensiveness. The Dev damage on that boss is going to way make up for whatever AUG stuff you missed out on. So I think as the tier evolves, as Season 4 goes on, you're going to see more swapping. I think right now, the thing is, a lot of people maybe aren't entirely sure when they should be swapping. They might have like some questions about what's optimal. The season always like takes a while to get started in terms of the cooking and figuring out the strategies. A lot of these dungeons we've done before, but we haven't done them with an AUG before. So there's going to be tech like Wernstone tech. There's going to be tech like using hover to fly over things, skips that you can do with hover and rescue, and there's going to be bosses where you want to play Dev, and all of this will be culminating as the weeks go on. But for right now, you're probably best off if you're doing high keys, just lock in AUG, and then try and look for situations where you can play Dev. That's probably the best strat. I'm guessing in these spots you would swap to Dev. There you are, blast single target. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like the thing is people are gonna want you as AUG when the key starts. So you can find, like, if you have a team that you're pushing with, you can find opportunities to play Devastation. But if it's not coordinated, you'll probably just end up blocking in AUG. So I don't think your pugging is like both, unless your pug is like really smart and you got like a lot of coordination. You get insta-kicked when you reach 24, says Dev. I mean, to be honest, you're not wrong. Yeah, I mean, you'll probably top the damage meter, but they'll still say, nah, you're bad. You're bad because you don't bring defensive buffs. Again, why does this spec bring defensive buffs? Can anyone tell me why AUG does this? No one knows. It just does. Because it's supposed to be better? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It's so fucking stupid, man. How can you balance them? You cannot balance them. You cannot balance these specs with the current design. It's impossible. You can't do it. Like, it's obvious, right? Anyways. So moving on. Completely new to WoW, and therefore Mage. Where do I start? A good place to start would be WoW head guides. Yeah, and then also watching videos, maybe. I have videos that can help you out. So go check out my YouTube. What do you think about Charge Blast over Catalyze in Tyrannical Week? In Tyrannical Week, you don't want Catalyze? What? Oh, for like more burst AoE and packs? But like Catalyze is like a lot of single target. It's like 3.5%. That's kind of a hard sell. Maybe. I don't know. I actually would drop Catalyze in Raid for like specific fights. Like Broodkeeper, I would drop Catalyze for Charge Blast. Because I'm doing a lot of focusing on one specific ad. And I still want to AoE. So I think in that case it kind of makes sense. But I'm not sure about Tyrannical. It's pretty good. You're missing on like a lot of boss damage doing that. Dude, how can I go on like this rant about the nuanced differences between AUG and Dev, and then someone comes in chat and just says AUG greater than Dev? ? Like, how can I explain this? You know what? Sure. Yeah, we'll just go with that. I agree with you. Forget everything else I said. AUG greater than Dev. Yep, that's the summary. No, I mean, listen, Dev actually has really, really good damage. The problem is AUG doesn't have damage, but it brings a lot of other stuff. So you decide on what you need. Do you need more defensiveness? Do you need more damage? In Mythic Plus, when you're pushing a high key, the answer is you need more defensiveness. There it is. TLDR. Do you know if there's a good resource to find out? Well, look, I just summarized it for you, Torcent. Do you know if there's a good resource out there that goes into how and when to use Renewing Blaze? How to use Renewing Blaze? When you're about to take damage. If you're about to take damage, you press the damage button that heals you for the damage you took. It's that easy. It's not about dev personals, it's about dev group utility. Dev personals are strictly worse than AUG though, if you think about it, because AUG has all of the defensives that Dev has as personals, but they also last 30% longer. And they have more buttons. Oh, and they bring more defensives because their defensive also increases the entire group's health pool. And it also gives the group a huge absorb shield whenever you pop your Breath of Aeons with the Chrono Ward. And they also have longer everything, longer Renewing Blaze, longer Twin Guardian, longer Zephyr, longer Hover, longer Obsidian Scales. I mentioned that one already, but everything is better. Oh, and they have Cheat Death. Did I mention that? They have Cheat Death. Oh, and Molten Blood. I forgot about that one too. They also have Molten Blood. Oh, and they give the tank more armor too. Forgot about that. Oh, yeah, and they also give the tank more damage because they put the shield on the tank and the shield it was. Oh, and they also give the healer more healing. How could I forget that one? Oh, and they also have... I could just keep going. I'm going to stop right there. Yeah, it's not... This isn't something you can balance. You need to approach it with a different strategy if you're trying to balance these two specs, because the strategy they're using right now, where you just tune the damage, it's not going to work. Been saying that. But yeah, it's maybe they don't want to balance it. Maybe they want AUG to be overpowered. I don't fucking know. All I know is in raid, dev fucking pumps. All right. So if you're raiding and you're playing AUG and you want to play dev, you should play dev. If you're doing keys and it isn't like a 17 and you want to play dev, you should play dev. You should play what you want. The only instance where I'm using like these hard truths about what's better, what's worse is like the cutting edge, like the highest keys possible, right? That's the only situation where you should limit yourself like that. It might be harder to find groups, sure. It'll be easier if you're playing AUG, but you can still do it. If you think your class is in a bad spot in Mythic Plus, always think about Afflux. Yeah, you know, Warlocks just love being the victim. You know, Warlock is funny because it's actually historically the best class, like, in the entire game for, like, multiple expansions in a row. If you look at which class has done the best historically over the entire history of modern raiding, Warlock, by far. Yeah. It's true, though. They maybe, they might lack in some abilities. But you know what's funny is I actually see them do really good damage. I think people just don't bring it because you have like way better specs you can play instead. Fucking Warlocks. Listen, I would love to be a Warlock simply because there's no AUG spec for Warlock. I want them to take AUG and I want them to move it off of Evoker. Just like get it out of there. Just push it away. Get it the fuck out. I don't want to share the class with that spec. And then my life will be better. Actually, no. I actually like playing AUG this season. I'll be honest with you. I like it in Mythic Plus specifically. I like AUG in Mythic Plus. I like Dev in Mythic Plus too. I like them both. I think that's fun. But I'm completely honest with how stupid it is. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, actually, it's not even that good. Like, it's just this reason. No. I'll tell you the truth about it. But I also appreciate it. Do I like being overpowered? Yes. My enjoyment of AUG is all about being overpowered. It's fun to be overpowered. Do I think it's good for the game? No. No, I think it should be removed. But being overpowered is really fun. And you got to accept the fact that people love being overpowered. So there's going to be people who like AUG simply because it's overpowered. It's not about the class design. It's not about it being good. It's not about it being fun. It's just fun to be overpowered. That's it. Really fun to be OP, you know? Finally, someone said it. Thank you, Preheat. Warlocks and Hunters literally want to... Yeah, see, I wasn't going to give the Warlock any slack, dude. You come in here trying to get some handouts as a Warlock, dude? No, not on my watch. Warlocks only get roasted in this chat. Sorry. Had to do it to him. No, I understand. There's like a certain... I get it. Yeah, tuning in Mythic Plus is different than Raid. Yeah, I get it, you know? But also, like... Fuck Warlocks. You don't even play Warlock. Yeah, well, they're just getting strays anyways. Let's see what time it is. So it's 1:33 or 10:33. Oh my god. 10:33. Okay, so in 30 minutes, we're going to be doing an interview with Nagura about all things PvE. I don't know if you saw recently, but she had an interview with some of the devs talking about the end game in the War Within. And we're going to be talking about Raid and Mythic Plus in that interview, and we have a bunch of other questions too we're going to be asking. So that'll be getting started up soon. Until then, we're just going to keep riffing. But I am probably in about 15 minutes going to start getting set up for that podcast. Am I excited about the War Within? Yes, absolutely. I think the War Within is looking very good. I've enjoyed my time on Alpha quite a bit. Really, really excited for Sun Fury. Sun Fury looks incredible. There's so much going on with Sun Fury. It's so fun. I actually have an article I just wrote up. It's not public yet, but I'm going to just give you a sneak peek about Sun Fury. So Sun Fury, one of the coolest things about Sun Fury is like the animations for it. So like you can see like how they use orbs. Check out these orbs. These are super cool. This is your spheres. And you basically use these as fuel for your little phoenix. So the phoenix, this is, I think people are calling him Arlo. Here's the little guy. He's a cute little guy. He helps us out. He's like our best friend. We love him. BFFs. But yeah, you get to just be like, you know, the, what's his name? Kel'Thas. Oh, here's how he disappears. That's the death animation. Rest in peace, little guy. But as you can see, his animation's super cool. This is him not attacking, though. Whenever he's attacking, he's just like spells machine gunning. No! Yeah, well, that he has to die eventually. He runs out of juice. You bring him back out, though. He's a phoenix. He comes back. Yo, Mia. Isakaru, thank you for the sub. Appreciate you. I was excited about Sunfire Mage until I watched Nagura video. Dev said they are making no changes for Mythic Plus. Well, I think they're making changes. I think that's maybe not exactly. Maybe that's not like the best way to summarize it. They'd said that they have no changes to announce. They didn't say that there are going to be no changes. They said that they can't announce any changes. There's a difference there, right? But I will say, we're talking Mythic Plus in the War Within. One thing that has me really not excited. Bro, what is this dungeon pool? What the fuck is this dungeon pool, chat? Like, huh? Grimbatol? Siege of Borealis? Necrotic Wake? Why? Why are you doing this to us, man? Like, are you wanting us to not be excited for the expansion? This is crazy. Why would they do this, dude? I can't speak to Stone Vault. I can't speak to City of Threads. I can't speak to Araka, City of the Echoes, Dawnbreaker. I haven't run those dungeons. I'm sure they'll be fun. But fucking Siege of Borealis? Huh? Like, can I get a reality check on these? Is everyone having the same reaction? Because I cannot believe my eyes when I read this. It's like they picked the stinkiest dungeons possible. And then they just slapped them in there. Necrotic Wake! Why? Ugh. I have one word to say. Ugh. Like, dude, I swear, they're so funny. Which dungeons will I have picked? Oh my god. Well, I can tell you right away. Not these dungeons. Okay, so what are the criteria? Let's see. So they picked 2 from Shadowlands, 1 from BFA, 1 from Cataclysm. Is that the criteria? We have to choose 1 Cata, 1 BFA, 2 Shadowlands? Is that it? Here, let's do it real quick. So we'll start with the Cata one. Oh, I misspelled that. I kind of remember a lot of them, but I just want to have them all. Here, let's actually do this. If we go database, zones, database, zones, and then we mouse over on Cataclysm, we can see all the dungeons. Okay, here they are. So it's Deep Home. Oh, wait, no, these are the normal zones. It's Blackrock Caverns, Grimbatol, Halls of Origination, Lost City, Stone Core, Vortex Pinnacle, Throne of Tides. Okay, so we can't do Throne of Tides. We can't do Vortex Pinnacle. Those 2 are off the table. We've also got End Time, Hour of Twilight, The Nexus, Well of Eternity, Zolomon, Zolgrub. I'm going to forget about those last 2. So they picked Grimbatol. I mean, a really fun one to me would just be something that's like not annoying to play. So like Stone Core would be fine. Blackrock Caverns would be fine. Halls of Origination, It's like, okay. I would not do Lost City. I would not do Grim Batol. Those are like the two I would definitely not choose. If you're just going with the base ones. If I have access to the other ones, I would actually like to do either In Time or Hour of Twilight. I feel like that might be a fun one to redo. So one of those. I'm just gonna go with Blackrock Caverns because I feel like that's the best one. So okay, now we have to pick a dungeon from either Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, or Legion, or Bell for Azeroth, right? So they chose Siege of Borealis on this one. Yeah, Siege of Borealis. So we can't choose Mechagon. That one's off the table. We can't choose Atal Dazar because we already did that. We can't choose Freehold because we already did that. I would not pick Shrine of the Storm. We cannot pick Underrot. I would not pick Toldagar. Honestly, and we can't pick Waycrest. Honestly, the BFA dungeons kind of suck. I forgot about these. Maybe King's Rest. That one might be fun. Yeah, maybe King's Rest. Honestly, though, I'd like to pick a dungeon for maybe a different expansion. I think the Legion dungeons were just like more fun overall. Like, can we get the Archway, dude? I fucking love the Archway. Can we get? Did we do Vault of the Wardens? Can we get Vault of the Wardens? Can we get? Oh, bro, I have Ashara. Or no. Hear me out. Maw of Souls. That'd be fun. There's a lot of good ones in there. What about WoD? WoD had Bloodmaw, Slagmines, Shadowmoon, Burial Grounds. Ugh, hate that one. Iron Docks, Arkandune, Skyreach. Skyreach should be fun. Grimrel, we already did that one. Everbloom, already did that. Upper Blackrock Spire. Wait, I don't even remember that one. I remember the classic version. Maybe that one because I don't remember it. And then Shadowlands. We have to pick like, what, 3 from this one, right? Or was it 2? I think they picked Mist and Necrotic Wake here. I think for Shadowlands, it might be fun to do. I mean, honestly, Theater of Pain would be fun. I kind of like the other side, but I think we already did that one. I'm not sure if we can do that again. I would definitely not pick the Necrotic Wake, though. Necrotic Wake is like hard banned. Plaguefall would be fun, too. Mist is okay. I'm okay with the Mist choice. That's like the only dungeon from the old shit where I'm like, yeah, okay. But the number one pick I would not do is Necrotic Wake because it's all using the items. I'm not a fan of that. I guess the one that really like offends me the most, and I'm using that like in a funny way, I'm not actually offended, is fucking Siege of Borealis. This one just like stinks, dude. That place stinks. Oh. Feels mega weird that a lot of the dungeons use outside things that don't involve the player to do damage. Yeah, I don't. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't know why they picked those things. Because it's like, they picked all of them. They picked Necrotic Wake. They picked Grim Batol with the dragons. Borealis. Sanguine. Yeah, Sanguine has the little vessels. But they don't kill the stuff directly. You have to damage it. Which is like, okay, I guess. Okay, I'm gonna start getting the stuff set up for the podcast. So I'm gonna swap it over to that scene, and we'll talk more chat once we get back. But anyways, yeah, we'll go to starting soon. Hello, hello. We are back with the Warcraft workshop, and today's guest is Nagura. So why don't you go ahead and go through the introductions, Jedit, and we'll get started here.
So welcome to the episode 3 of the Warcraft Workshop, a podcast where we're helping the average player become a bit better than average with each episode. My name's Jedith, and I'm here with my co-host Preheat. And today's episode is going to be all about endgame PvE, and who better to chat with than the one and only Nagura. So Nagura, if you just want to give the viewers like a quick recap of your history and kind of what you're up to nowadays.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am Nagura. I've been playing WoW since vanilla. I'm a streamer mainly. I'm also a caster. I cast CMDI and TGP and all sorts of other tournaments for World of Warcraft. I've been a world first raider in the past. I've raided in Method for quite a few years. A long time ago, though. I haven't been doing that for quite a while. And yeah, now I'm a streamer. I'm raiding in a Mythic Guild still with Preheat, actually. So yeah, that's what I'm up to right now.
Yeah, and I
Also,
can
Moonkin player, of course.
Yes, yes, known Moonkin player. Yeah, we're about to get into that raid here in just a bit. Our raid's actually coming up soon, but first we should talk about some of the news because there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the past week, or I guess past 2 weeks since we last spoke. So we're just going to recap that real quick. So obviously we have Season 4 now. Season 4 has been out, and we've gotten a bit of time to play it. Obviously, the season came out with a lot of bugs, and there was a lot of stuff that Blizzard had to fix to try and get everything the way it should be. I'd say probably the biggest thing, and Nagura, maybe you noticed this in like your content that you were doing. It seems to be like Awaken raids mainly, so maybe if you didn't pug the raid, you didn't see it. But there was like issues with like rogues having their caustic splatter damage not quite coming out. Obviously, there was like the devastation evoker tier bonus. Have you gotten into like heroic or normals? Have you seen any of this stuff yet?
No, I actually haven't done the raid at all. So, as you said, we're raiding later today on Mythic. So, I'm just going to jump straight into Mythic, not doing normal or heroic. I'm sure it's going to work out fine.
Yeah,
It'll be
yeah,
fine.
it's
It'll be great.
most of this stuff has been fixed, luckily. Unfortunately for me, like my NA guild already cleared the raid, so I had like a fourth of my tier bonus that I was supposed to have. But it seems like
So,
overall
what's
the
the bug
raids.
with the bonus?
Oh, so the bug with the bonus was it wasn't scaling correctly. So like Awaken raids, apparently they have like 4x scaling on the damage. But the tier bonus damage, since it like is ignite basically, it wasn't scaling properly. So you're only getting a fourth of the damage you should have, and that's the same for I believe rogues and monks and druids with the burning frenzy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad they noticed. It would have been weird if they just
Oh,
didn't notice that the damage doesn't scale.
oh, trust me, they know this. People were complaining like crazy. But luckily, they got those fixed. We also have some changes, reworks coming to the War Within. These obviously don't have to deal with Boomkin, but I'd like to hear from you. Are you hoping for some Boomkin changes in the War Within? Maybe some sort of rework like Warlocks and Mages are getting here?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Like I've tested Moonkin on the War Within Alpha quite a bit. The hero talent tree or the trees do well. One of them looks good. The other one is a complete dumpster fire, and I've refused to test it because it's literally around like the trees, the treants.
Oh God,
And you
no, not
share it with
pets.
restaurants. Yeah. And to me, it's just like makes no sense. First of all, like the trees, they're pets and you can't control them. Why would I want a whole tree like around those trees, like themed around it? And then there's some other talents that, in my opinion, don't make sense when it comes to the Moonkin playstyle.
Right.
So for me, I just hope they completely rework that or rethink that one. And then the
Yeah,
other tree is a lot better, but that one, I think it has a lot of passives. A lot of people are complaining about it not being as like flashy and as interesting as some of the like really cool hero talent trees we've seen.
yeah, absolutely. So we actually had Vinruki on last week and we were talking about PvP stuff, and it's funny because he said pretty much the same thing about the trees. Apparently the trees are a contentious issue in PvP. Like people really don't like the fact that the trees are doing so much healing, and it's really hard to shut down because they're pets. So it's
Yeah.
really confusing that,
Oh,
that they
true.
keep going with like this pet design for doing stuff. I will say Fire Mage has kind of a similar issue, but with the Phoenix pet, because you have that for Sun Fury. But the
Oh,
Phoenix
I
is
saw
actually,
that one, yeah.
but the Phoenix is so cool that like you
Yeah, it
forgive it,
does look
right?
cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it kind of does like a different thing because it just throws out a bunch of spells and then it just goes away once it's done. So I feel like it's a bit more predictable and easy to manage. But yeah, so I guess Warlock talent's not looking so good. If you had to rate so far like the War Within Boomkin talents, where would you put it on like a scale from 1 to 10?
From I assume
The
you
one
mean
that you
from like a
like.
playstyle
Yeah, the one that you like from a
perspective and not
playstyle
like
perspective, yeah.
because obviously we don't have tuning or anything. Whew, that is hard to tell. I'm gonna go with like I feel like it's more fun than what we have now. But
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy Moonkin playstyle right now. So,
Yeah. Okay.
so I
Wh-
would put.
Yeah.
I personally would probably put it around 7 or 8.
Okay, that's pretty strong. I noticed you have like 4 choice nodes in your Elun's Chosen tree too. That's interesting. I think most of them normally have 3 choices.
Well, that I didn't notice that there's like more choices or not, but when I test them, like when it comes to number choices, like where one thing is like you literally just don't know if it's better or not. Like it's just like a theory crafting thing,
Hmm.
and that's something that the theory crafters eventually will do the math on once it's tuning and everything is done. So I just pick one, and I don't really care about the other if it's not like some active talent. And for the other ones, I did test around, and some of them are very interesting. But yeah, usually the choice nodes, I feel like if they're just like a number thing and it's all passive, then whatever, you just pick one, I guess.
Yeah. I want to say too, like a lot of the criticism that a lot of the hero talent trees have been getting lately are that, some of them are really flashy and they're really cool, like, the Death Knight ones. And then some of the other ones we've seen feel like they haven't really been fleshed out yet. And I think it is a case where a lot of them just haven't received their visuals that go along with it yet. Like I know the Demon Hunter ones in particular have been getting a lot of flack lately because they don't really show anything different. But there is confirmation that they are going to be getting new visuals soon, just not yet. So I think like a lot of the judgments that people are passing on these trees are there's obviously things you can judge like the functionality of it, but in terms of like the big flashiness, I think people need to just hold on, like, chill, um
You're
and
also a
I
demon
think
who shoots lasers out of your eyes. Like
there's only
we
so
need to
much you
get
can add on top of that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Like how do you
yeah,
That's
take a
true.
demon that shoots lasers out of their eyes to like the next level? They're already like so high
yeah,
up there, right?
It's
yeah,
crazy because Demon Hunters look so cool, right? Like one of the most favorite animations I have in the game as a whole is just like the meta animation when a demon hunter like jumps
yeah,
in and like turns like it's just so good, right? So yeah, I can see how
yeah,
it's difficult to make any of that better. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's already so
I
much
just
going
think
on.
like I just think like once we get all the visuals, people are impressed by flashiness, right? That's all it takes.
mhm.
You give them something super flashy, and then they just stop caring about everything else. So I think hero talents are gonna work out. People just need to give it time.
It's still very
Yeah,
early in
I
the
think
alpha.
that yeah, it's very early in the alpha, and I also think that I think it's a little bit maybe Blizzard's like quote unquote fault that they gave some of the classes like something that is super super cool and super flashy because now people want that, of course, right?
Yeah,
Because it's not a given that every class needs to have this super insane visual, but if one spec gets it or one class gets it, then of course everyone wants it to be as cool as that one. So
yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think if the talents are gonna be mostly passive, which it seems like a lot of them are, then the flashiness is kind of needed to make people
yeah.
feel like it's actually something it's worth having a new system for.
I think
Otherwise, just add passive buffs.
yeah, I think one of the points that was made, I think it was on like Max's podcast, the podcast. They were talking about how to approach hero talents and how we feel about the design of it. And one of the main points was like you should be able to tell what hero spec someone is just by looking at like a short clip of their character playing. And I actually think that's like pretty accurate. And so far, a lot of the trees actually work really well that way, right? Like if you see like a Sun Fury mage, you immediately notice the spheres above their head. You notice the bird flying around dealing damage with spells. If you see a Death Knight on a horse, you know that obviously they're a rider of the apocalypse. I think they just need to take that same sauce and apply it to all the rest of them that maybe need a little help. So I don't know if there's something
Yeah.
like very obvious about the Boomkin one, but like purely based on like aesthetics and how it looks. Where would you, I guess, how do you feel about the current Boomkin offerings?
I think from the aesthetics, it's really like on the low end. Like I think a lot of people are not too happy about it. Um, because I mean we have two trees. One of them is like a loon, and one of them is around these trees. And the loon is something that Moonkin already has by default, right?
Right.
We have
Mhm.
so the only thing we're getting from the loon tree is more Fury Balloons, which we already have as a spell. So it's just more moons and more like furies and whatever. And it's like, okay, you don't necessarily notice a difference if you're not aware of it. And I guess the other like flashiness is still missing too. Like I certainly would not be able to tell what another Moonkin is playing unless I look through like literally details or logs.
Ah, I
Like
see.
it's very, very hard to tell. Or you see trees, because obviously the trees are something that is definitely special. But yeah, other than the trees, there's nothing like insane going on visual wise. One thing that I guess is a little bit difficult, and you gotta give them that, is that Druid is probably the hardest of all classes to make very visually different, because you share the tree with someone that is like a literal different animal. Like it's like
Yeah.
a cat and the moonkin. So it's like very difficult to find something that you can do with that. So I can see how that's hard, but right now I think there's definitely something they can improve on still.
Boonkin is pretty crazy too. Like I had no idea. I logged onto a druid alt that I had the other day, and I went to the barber. I had no idea that Moonkins could like customize themselves so deeply. Like you can customize the particle effects on your character. Like you can make it, I don't know, like more flashier. You put a moon on your head or whatever. Like I had no clue. So I think they're kind of in the same kind of space as Demon Hunter, where you already have this like really strong thematic visual. That it might be hard to really top it and increase it.
Yeah, I think you need to focus on the spell animations in that case, right? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
they could always go with like different colors too. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see like iterations. If people aren't happy about it and they're getting feedback about it, it seems like Blizzard's been pretty good about responding to the feedback so far in the alpha. So I guess if that's the feedback they're getting, they're probably going to cook something up. So hopefully we'll see that soon. So speaking of the War Within and all the new content that's coming out here, you had an interview with some of the devs talking about the end game in the War Within. And one of the topics that came up were delves. So I guess I kind of want to get your perspective on it. Have you gotten into those delves? Like, have you done some of those? And how do you feel about the content so far?
Yeah, so I tested Dells quite a bit. I did all of them once. I did them on alpha. Um, so to me, like I was really excited when I heard about the content, not for me personally, but for the game as a whole. Because obviously I care about World of Warcraft and I want people to be happy when they play it. Because I mean, it's my job. So, so I was excited for Dells because to me it felt like it's like more casual content that people can do, and that actually has a progression part as well. Because that is something that we had been missing and that people really wanted in World of Warcraft. So I was
Hmm.
happy when they added it. I tested it out, and to me, it certainly felt like it's not my content. Like you literally go in and it feels like I don't know, some objective or whatever. Like it just feels like a quest or like
Yeah.
a scenario, something like that,
Yep.
which is definitely not my content. I guess every high end PvE or PvP player would not be like super happy about doing questing or doing something like this. But obviously, the thing that we were able to test in alpha were only like the really low difficulties, like tier one and tier two. They did say it's going to scale up all the way to higher tiers, and that there's also going to be tiers that are above the reward scale. So at some point, the rewards are not going to go higher, but you still can add difficulty. And then there's even like one difficulty that only has like a boss in it, very similar to like the Jailer's Gauntlet and Torghast,
Right.
apparently. And that is something that would be cool and would maybe even be similar to something like the Mage Tower, which a lot of people were excited for. Also, high end PvE and PvP players too. So, depending on how they're doing that and how that works out, it could be fun content. But I don't necessarily think that this content is made for high end PvE players. Even if they have this one thing, I don't think that people like us are going to be sitting there all day and doing delves all day. Personally, I don't think that's what it's made for.
Yeah, I think it's nice though that there's this alternative route to getting your vault, because they showed in the reveal that you can actually get the Great Vault opened up with delves in there, and the fact that you can get gear up to like a Mythic plus 15 currently, so about halfway up the upgrade chain there is really nice for folks who maybe don't have enough time. One thing that really stood out to me whenever they were talking about the like strategy of building out this content was they want it to be something where if you have to go do something, or if you don't have a lot of time, you can just get into a delve, start it up, and then if you have to like AFK or something, it's not a big deal, right? So essentially like an alternative to raiding or Mythic Plus where you can take it at your own pace and maybe easier content. I know personally I'll be in there just to get my initial gear, right? Whenever it's like the expansion first came out, maybe first couple weeks, but I agree. I don't think I'm going to be spending much time in the delves much longer than that, unless they have some really, really awesome Mage Tower-like content.
Yeah, that's. I was wondering about that though. Like they mentioned, there might potentially be a Mage Tower esque type of challenge in that higher end tier, like 13s or whatever. But I'm curious how that's going to work because if they're not tuned and geared around a specific role or like a class, I don't know how that's going to be balanced. Like some classes might have more available utility that would help them in a fight like that compared to other classes that don't have access to that type of utility. So my one thought was like, okay, maybe they're going to use the companion as sort of the tuning knob, and you could use either a healer companion or a DPS companion to help you. But it's also strange because you don't really have access to trigger your companion's abilities. They kind of just happen whenever. So I don't know how that idea of a mage tower challenge is really going to work. I don't know if you guys have any ideas on how they might make it functional.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, as you said, because of the different roles and also like different size of group as well, right? If you
Right.
can do this
Yeah.
with one player and with five, like that would be a very big difference when it comes to scaling. But yeah, then you also have tanks doing it, and like let's say a Blood Decay wants to do a challenge in comparison to a Resto Druid, like that would be a huge difference
Yeah.
in what it needs to be scaled for. So that is for sure interesting how they're gonna do it. I did see like the talent tree that was available for brand, like for your companion, and they
Mm.
could maybe do something with that. I think there's still a lot they have to do with that talent tree because I read through some of the talents and they just seem very bad. Like some of the talents, for example, say if you take damage, then Bran will cast like a bubble that is like on your location, like kind of like a disc bubble, and that gives you a big damage reduction. But it procs every 3 minutes. So it's like
Ooh.
you go into the delve, like a mob hits you, the bubble
Ins-
spawns where you don't need it. You just have to keep
Yeah.
running, and
yeah.
then when you need it. So yeah, maybe if you could get more control over these abilities, then this whole like scaling issue, as you said, might actually be solved. But if that is not a thing, if this is all just random and the companion is kind of useless, then it would be almost impossible to make it the same difficulty for everyone. Which, to be fair, I also think is not the end of the world. I think it's fine if the challenge is maybe super difficult for one spec and not so difficult for the other spec, if it's just like an extra thing that does not give you any rewards. Like I think that it's not super necessary for the difficulty to be the same for everyone,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. If you're doing it just for the love of the game, I think it's like those levels where you're not getting like higher loot since it's capped at 15. I think it's fine too. I will say like if you look at like Torghast or the Mage Tower, other instances where they've done kind of like solo content that's challenging, definitely seems like tanks have a easier time. There's certain DPS specs that have self healing that will also have an easier time. And then if you're playing something that has no heals like Mage, you're gonna have a rough time. But maybe Brand will help us out with his potions that he throws at us. I will say though, the reward system from it, at least the cosmetic rewards, I absolutely love the new direction that's kind of been in the game since I guess this expansion, where they're just doing silly things as transmog.
Yeah.
Like I love the onesie, I love these hats. Like you can get like the mushroom hat, you can get like a fish hat, a candle hat, and then there's also like the mount that you can get that's customizable. I think they're doing really well when it comes to like the art team stuff. So I'll definitely be working to try and get the mushroom hat. That's like my favorite one. And if you haven't seen it animated, it actually has spores that like fall out of it as you're wearing it. It looks really awesome. Definitely very excited by that. So moving on, we also have seen the dungeon pool for the War Within, and obviously we have 4 new dungeons that we don't really know anything about. They're not really testable in alpha, but we do have 4 that we recognize. So I'm just going to go over those 4 real quick. So we have up first is Mist of Tyr in the Sight. We also have the Necrotic Wake. We have Siege of Borealis and Grim Batol. And Nagura, I don't know about you, but whenever I first read this list, I actually had a trouble believing my eyes. I could not believe some of the inclusions here.
Because you
How
were
do you
so
feel about
excited.
this pool? Yeah, I was no, no. Siege of Borealis, that one really like struck me. I was like, why did they choose this one? Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how they rebalance this stuff. But a lot of these dungeons have like tools that you use inside of them that just kind of do the dungeon for you, right? Like Grim Batol, you ride the dragons. You've got in Siege of Borealis like the gun that you shoot, and Necrotic Wake, you obviously have the weapons. So how are we feeling about the season 1 dungeon rotation so far? Just at first glance.
Yeah, so I personally am not happy at all about the dungeons they brought back. Uh, the new ones, obviously, we don't know. Now, the one thing, because I was like really dooming over it initially, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. Like, I'm going to hate this season and so on. But in hindsight, like looking at some of the other dungeons they brought back that I initially thought would be bad, I do think that Blizzard is pretty good at addressing some of the issues that people have with those older dungeons and changing them. Doesn't necessarily mean that the dungeon all of a sudden is going to be good, but it could be, right? And some dungeons that were fun in the past are now not so good anymore. Like I think it always, just because we remember them in a certain way, doesn't mean it has to be this way again. For example, like say Necrotic Wake, the weapons they were part of the dungeon, but they could just say, you know what, we're removing the weapons; they're not usable anymore. So you have to play the dungeon differently. And then in return, they're gonna increase the timer or nerf some of the mobs in there or change the way the bosses work or whatever. And then that would change up the dungeon a lot and it would feel very different. Could be worse, it could be better, but at least it would be different, right? And it's hard to tell what's it gonna be beforehand. So I'm personally just gonna like uh, scale back a little bit on my dooming and hope that Blizzard is going to be addressing some of those issues because I do think that for very first dungeon pool that they release for a new expansion is incredibly important for
Yeah.
them too. Like it has to be good and people need to be excited for it because obviously Blizzard wants people to play the expansion, buy the expansion. So I think if everyone's going to be super dooming over it and like testing the dungeons and not liking them, I think they are going to be taking it very seriously and addressing some of those issues, maybe making them really good dungeons. Who knows?
I think the
Yeah,
changes we've
there's
seen so far in Eltaris, especially with like the chains, is like a good example of that. Go ahead, Jeddah.
I think that's a great change. Yeah, like the chains used to be such a crucial part in timing that dungeon, where if you went in there with a pug and they didn't know how to properly do it, and you couldn't communicate between the people as to who was going to use what chain and when, it was just a dead key right off the hop. But with the changes they've made now, it's like yeah, it's a great thing to be able to use them, but it's not like 100% necessary. And if you mess it up, it's like okay, whatever. But with those other dungeons, like they're definitely going to have to do something. Um, Even with Mists of Tyrannus Scythe, like without having before, if you didn't have a Night Fae, you wouldn't get the respawn point halfway through the dungeon. So they're definitely going to have to relook at that, and even just getting the skip, like being able to go through that gate right at the start of the dungeon. That was a pretty big thing if you had a Night Fae. So they're gonna have to relook at some of these. And well, like you said, Nagura, I have faith that they will. They've done a pretty good job so far in making the dungeons that we think we're going to be pretty punishing just feel a little less bad to run. But my question for you guys with the new alpha build is in the list of the season one dungeon pool is the Stone Vault. Have you guys had a chance to run that one on alpha yet?
I did one of the dungeons in alpha. I just remember, I don't remember what was this one. Was it the one with the kobolds
The
and the
other one.
candle?
The
Okay,
other one.
I only did the candle one, and that one is horrible. So I'm glad it's not the
Yeah.
bad one.
Yeah, that's another one where it's like it's cool the first time you do it, the kobold one, but then you do like the minecart part a couple times and you're like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be horrible in a timed situation." Um,
Exactly.
but
Yeah, I
the
wanted
stone
like what I wanted to like clarify when I said it's
yeah,
horrible. I definitely meant like in an M plus
yes,
setting, right? Like the
exactly.
dungeon itself is very interesting and very special, and I'm sure a lot of people are gonna love it when they do it the first time, right? And even if
Yeah,
when they do it a few times, but every time you do a dungeon nowadays, in my head at least, I think of M plus, and yeah, for that it's unless they do major changes to the way the card section works, it will be a very very annoying dungeon very soon.
yes.
Yeah, I think there's
Um,
like little adjustments they can make too that might make things better too. Like the mist, right? Like allowing them to see the marks like in combat might be a good one for which way you go through the maze. Like maybe with the carts, maybe there's an alternate route that they do. They love to like add skips for the RP and Mythic Plus, so hopefully there's some changes like that, or else we'll maybe be having a bad time in there.
yeah. The stone vault seemed pretty cool though. It's a shorter dungeon. The bosses are really cool. My only fear about that one is the trash. There's a lot of trash in the stone vault. Like a lot of trash, and there's a lot of mechanics going on. And one of them, I don't know which mob it is exactly, but there's a fear that gets casted pretty often. And I went in there with just three of us because we couldn't put a whole group together. So it was like me and Dorky and a healer. I can't remember who it was, but we went in there and it was taking us extra long to kill these trash mobs because obviously it was just three people instead of five. and we just kept getting feared over and over and over because we didn't have enough kicks. So I don't know, that one's going to be interesting. It's really cool though. The first boss is I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it's super cool.
All
All
right.
right, looking forward to it then.
Yeah, I actually haven't run any of those new ones. As soon as season 4 came out, I ran the Rookery and the Cinder Brew place. Both of those I actually liked a lot. I like the Cinder Brew one especially. That place is actually sick.
Yeah.
It totally reminds me of like the Stormstout Brewery dungeon from Mists of Pandaria. So yeah, that
Yep.
was really really fun. I will
Speaking
say,
of that one though, sorry, I just want to say if we're talking about meadery, that one, if you guys noticed, it has some profession specific
yeah,
items
Oh,
usable
I
that
didn't
are
see
on the
that.
ground. Yeah, there's one for sorry, the first one you come in contact with is engineering. It's like a flamethrower. So you can be a goblin to pick it up, or you can be engineering. I never actually tried it, so I don't know the actual power of it. If it's going to be something that like you're going to want for sure, but there is profession things in there. There's something at the end of the dungeon too, which I thought was going to be something good, but it's just like a little note that you can read if you're a goblin or an inscriptionist, kind of just giving some lore on the dungeon, I guess. But what do you guys think of them potentially putting more profession specific items in dungeons?
I'm personally not a big fan of any kind of items or buffs or whatever you can use that are like where you need anything. Like I don't like it when it's class specific, when it's race specific, when it's profession specific. Just because I think in dungeons in particular, you only have 5 people. So if those 5 people need something specific, it's already like you're already struggling. Because
hmm
in dungeons, it's already hard to find certain buffs, to find bloodlust, to find a battle rust. And then if in addition you also have to make sure that somebody has a certain profession, then it just causes so many issues in dungeons. And I don't like whenever Blizzard is doing that. For the raid, of course, it's a different story. There's much more people that fit in there. But for dungeons, I personally don't like it. I think they always have the reasoning that the professionals should feel like they can do something special or whatever. But I just don't think it makes sense in a competitive setting like in Plus.
yeah.
If you do it in a normal version of the dungeon or something like that, or if it's just like a tiny little buff or something that is visually cool, something like that, okay. But if as soon as you get like a competitive advantage for having it, I'm personally not the biggest fan of it.
I think it kind of falls into the same pitfalls as the raid buffs currently do in Mythic Plus, because so much of the Mythic Plus meta, is, at least at like the highest levels, like the competitive levels, as you said, is informed by like the raid buffs that you bring. So it's like, oh, we need int buff, we need fort, we need verse, we need demon hunter buff, or like something else to that effect. Oh, we need aug defensives. Like, so you kind of end up in like this god comp kind of setup because there's so many raid buffs, and in raid obviously you can fit all of them in, but in Mythic Plus you only just go for the biggest ones, and then you end up like kind of hard enforcing a certain comp for pretty much all the content. And then this is on top of that another layer, or I guess you can at least change your professions, right? But it's still a little annoying to feel like you have to go a certain way, or the comp is like overly restrictive. I think it's just like another barrier of entry kind of for Mythic Plus, but I think it could easily be changed just slightly. Just, you know, like you said, give it just some flavor maybe, or maybe look at how raid buffs are working in Mythic Plus to try and fix the comp issues. Because currently it seems like the current comp that's the best is just probably going to be the best in the War Within 2, unless the tuning is like wildly different, just simply because you need to buff your healer as much as possible. It's pretty much the bottom line.
Yep,
So
I would agree with that.
moving on to like affixes in Mythic Plus. So this is the other thing that it seems like the community is fairly negative about when it comes to like doing dungeons. Obviously, we need to have something that changes every week, or else it's just the same dungeons every week. Everything is exactly the same. But affixes do kind of rub players the wrong way. It feels like a lot of the, there were times when they did like a kiss curse kind of thing, and I think people liked certain versions of that. Maybe not so much thundering, but other ones that people have been into. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. How do you feel about affixes currently, and what would you like to see done with the affix model for Mythic Plus, Nagura?
Okay, so for me, this is always like a very interesting question because I personally don't have anything against affixes as much as other people have like problems with them. Now, it's not that I love like bolstering or like really bad or sanguine or whatever. I'm not the biggest fan of some of these affixes, but to me, at the moment, it feels like they have nerfed all of the affixes to such an extent that to me, I'm okay with them. So I'm honestly wondering if most people have issues with affixes because they are actually annoying them, or if it's like just the imbalance between the difficulty of the affixes that is causing problems for players. Because if one week you play dungeons and it feels easy enough, and then next week it feels a lot more difficult, then I can see why you would be hating affixes so much, because then you don't enjoy it as much as you enjoyed it last weekend. So having like a much better balance between the affixes, which to be fair also has improved since like Legion or whatever, where the balance was not non-existent. So it definitely has been improved, but not to an extent as people would want it to be. People want to go into a class every week and it to feel similar in difficulty. Now, obviously, in the first few days that you do in class, whenever an affix change comes in, is always going to feel a bit harder. And I think that also plays into people's opinions as well. And the fact that a lot of people just by default see an affix and they already have like a bad association with it, even if it was nerfed and it's not as bad anymore, right? People think, oh, bolstering. And bolstering is an affix that has been really bad in the past. And now it's in some dungeons, it's definitely manageable. There are some really bad dungeons, but others you don't even notice bolstering even existing. And I think people still just have this like bad connection they have with just the word bolstering, and they think it's bad. And then obviously, no matter how much they nerf it, they're always going to think it's bad. So in my opinion, because people think so badly about affixes, it doesn't matter what I think, and I don't think it matters that Blizzard thinks they're okay. I think they just have to like do something else with them. I don't personally like the like kiss curse effect for a weekly affix, because I do think weekly affixes have to be much simpler than kiss curse affixes, because these were seasonal affixes that people were playing all the time, and then at some point you got used to them and it was fine and it was fun. But if something rotates every week, I don't think you can get used, or it would be too difficult for it to be a kiss curse affix, because people always forget that the positive aspect of a kiss curse affix also has to be used to its fullest potential
Right.
to be able to get the most out of it, which if you don't do that, you're going to fall behind. And an average player that is not doing that is going to not be able to do as high keys as a really good coordinated group that is going to do that, right? And I think people don't think about that problem with the kiss curse. But yeah, I still think that the affixes, in my opinion, should be like either just remove some of the like really bad ones that people associate something bad with, because nerfing them I don't think is going to do anything, right? So I think just remove something like bolstering stang, just remove them, give us something else, and then make sure that they're as close in difficulty to the other ones that people don't mind as much, and then just go from there. I'm also not somebody that thinks that we need positive affixes, because people think that the negative affixes is what is the, like anti-fun thing, but positive affixes in my opinion are going to do something very similar to the negative affixes, except that people don't feel the need to play around them, because they're like, oh, if we don't get the buff, we don't get the buff, it's fine, right? But the fact that they have a negative effect for not having the buff, because the dungeon is going to be tuned around having them, right, or around playing around it, is something that people don't think about, and it's just going to create something similarly frustrating to negative affixes, in my opinion. So yeah, I think changing the affixes, but maybe leaving them negative, just not having such a big impact on the dungeon, so you don't have to like fully like change your playstyle every week, but just remove the bad ones that people already hate, because I think you can't fix them anymore. Like people already,
They've
in
already
their
made their
mind, they're already
decision.
horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do really like how they've redesigned the scaling so that you don't get the other affix until 10. I think that that's like
Yeah,
such a good
that is
change,
good.
because 9 gives you so much of the rewards and you can just do 9s and not have to deal with that. But for the people who really enjoy the content, they can go in and do it and have the extra added effect. I will say though, when it comes to affixes, like I acknowledge that a lot of my feelings about affixes are due to having to do them as like the class that is good at doing a certain thing, right? But there are affixes that I just don't mind at all, but usually those are healer affixes, right? Like
Yeah.
stuff where it's just like, oh, just put the job on the healer, like they're not doing anything anyways. So it's funny, whenever you ask this opinion about affixes, I feel like you get a really different answer depending on like who it is who has to do the affix. Like for instance, whenever we had Jack on in our first episode, he was like very against the ones that like people just put on the healer. And it's understandable, right? Like you don't want to have like all this other stuff added on top of your normal job. It's like I'm not playing healer to try and, you know, deal with the spell every other second on some other guy when there's already the spells I need to do on the party or stuff like that. So it's kind of funny to see that perspective shift. But I do think that ultimately the affixes, like, it does just need to be balanced. It's really frustrating whenever there's an affix that's like bad for healers, and then healers just don't log in. And I'm like, okay, let's do a key,
Yeah,
and it's
that's
like,
a
where are the
huge issue.
healers
Yeah.
at? Where are the healers? They don't want to play this week.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I feel like that part is kind of frustrating to deal with.
One more thing I also wanted to say is about like not only do I think do affixes have to be balanced more between one another, but also between like key levels. Because I think a very good example is bursting. Bursting is like a lot more difficult on lower keys, and on
Yeah.
higher keys it's a non-existent affix because you have such a easy time to just stop killing mobs because mobs have so much HP. If you stop damage, they're also just not gonna die. But
Mhm.
in a low key, when mobs have a lot less HP, it's very difficult to just say stop damage, and then you're going to keep having mobs dying and it keeps rolling bursting, and the damage that it does is similar or the same, even like it stops scaling at some point. But yeah, healers just hate bursting in low keys, and on high keys people love it, so that is something that is not ideal either.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a little nervous to see how some of the affixes scale with the current system. Like, we haven't had Spiteful yet. And I know generally, like, you can kind of just avoid getting hit by Spiteful if you're good. But in pug groups, that's an unfair expectation of some of those players. So I think once we see Spiteful for the first time with this new scaling, I think we're going to see a lot of deaths.
As a ranged, I'm
Um,
like, what's spiteful? I
yeah,
don't deal with
exactly. It
those.
must be nice.
Wait, but how did they change the scaling on Spiteful, or do you mean just
Well,
like the general dungeon scaling?
just the general dungeon scaling. And because we're so early in the season that people aren't fully geared yet, because before it used to stop scaling at 20, right? So now I guess it would stop scaling at
10,
At
I would
10
assume.
now. Yeah,
10. Yeah.
I
So
think
I
so.
don't know. I feel like we're going to see a lot of deaths from some of these affixes, but I don't know.
They're pretty
Yeah, I
melee
think,
players. I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, I'm
Sorry.
talking to two range players. You guys don't even know. Um, it's affixes are such a hard thing though. Like, I feel like we're never gonna make everyone happy with whatever Blizzard decides to do with them. Some people are dead set on getting positive affixes. We have other people who don't want them. We have the Kiss Curse Club. Like, it's just we're never gonna get to a solid point where everyone's happy. I don't know what the answer is, but I do feel like for some reason fixes felt like they were in a better state in previous expansions or even like seasons than they were now. Because, like you said, once you start nerfing all of these affixes to the point where they become non-issues, then as soon as they're put up against the affixes that do pose at least just a little bit of an issue, there's the imbalance again, and then people start complaining about the ones that are an issue. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is, but I hope we can figure something out for the new expansion because Mythic Plus is definitely feeling a little stale as it is. I'm still hoping for
Yeah.
a big Mythic Plus reward system, but I don't think that'll ever happen.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell. Yeah, Mythic Plus is like in a weird spot, I think. What do you guys think about the rotation of the dungeons? Because they started doing that in Dragonflight, right? Where every season we have a completely different dungeon rotation. Do you think that was a success? Do you think are you personally happy with it? Are other people like liking it? Or what do you generally think about that compared to having the same dungeons all the time?
When I'm playing a new expansion, I want to play the new dungeons. So like going
Mhm.
into a new expansion and playing the old dungeons right away to me just doesn't feel as good. I get that they're like trying to space it out and it also gives them time to like fix the dungeons and make everything work well, but I kind of wish that like the season 1 of every expansion was just the new dungeons just so we can see all the new content and then maybe start rolling it out over next seasons, but again, how do you keep it so that there's always a little bit of new mixed in with the old, right? Like the only way to really do that is either by adding new dungeons, which is more design work and costs more money, or it's just by breaking up the current dungeons that are new. So I like personally though, like I just want to play the new dungeons. That's it.
But so you would, if you could choose between whatever we have now or just play the new 8 dungeons and keeping them for the other seasons.
I don't know if necessarily keeping them for every season would be the strat, but I definitely would want to at least start strong with all of the new ones and then maybe taper it off to certain ones, select ones. But I liked the system before where it was like they just add new dungeons, like as the new patches came out. So you started off with all the new ones, And then next season, it's like, okay, we get some old ones returning from previous expansions, plus we have even newer ones that have just been made. To me, that would be ideal. But again, I realize that costs more money and more research and more development time to accomplish. So it's maybe not realistic if they're trying to put out expansions at the rate they're trying to do it.
Yeah, it's I don't know. So there's the thing with like having all of the new dungeons for the entire expansion gives you a lot of time to sort of develop the mastery for those dungeons, which I really enjoy. Because it usually takes me a while to pick up on everything that's going on in those dungeons. But then there's also on the other end of the spectrum is like when you get these old dungeons coming back is with every season you have the opportunity to learn something new in all of these new dungeons that are coming back and even the old ones. So it's kind of like giving you short-term gratification in all of these little dungeons as opposed to spreading it out over the entire expansion. But then we fall into the issue of getting these horrible dungeons from the past brought back up, and then it I'm almost certain that there are people who saw the, War Within Season 1 dungeon pool and were just like, "Okay, I am not playing Mythic Plus." Like, they've already decided, they're done.
Yeah.
So, I I think I don't know, if I were to choose between one or the other, I would personally probably go with just all the brand new stuff for the entire expansion. That's just me.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I do agree as well that playing the same dungeons over time does give you this like mastery in the dungeons, which is really cool. I personally like that as well. And you can argue that even if you don't play as much in plus as like the top end players do, at some point the amount of knowledge you can gain for dungeons and the amount of like tiny little things you can figure out has a diminishing return, right? Like at some point
Mhm.
there's only so much you can figure out, and then after like a year of the expansion, yeah, maybe the top end players they know one or two things that you don't, but you have figured out everything else as well, so you don't feel as behind compared to them. One thing that I guess is the downside with the dungeons being the same all the time is for people that really don't play a lot or people that start late in an expansion, right? Like if you start season 3 and everyone knows the dungeons perfectly already, and you are just new, like that is something that is going to be very difficult to get into as a new player. And I think that was like partially why they're doing this whole rotation thing. So people that start new or people that haven't played that much don't feel so intimidated getting into a new season. And I see that, of course, as a positive for those new players, but I'm not a new player and I'm
Right.
somebody who plays all of the time. So for me, playing the same dungeons actually might also be better compared to what we have now. But yeah, like I understand the reasoning behind it, and yeah, it is what it is sometimes.
It's interesting they said that, even the old dungeons that are being brought back are going to be available as Mythic Zero. So I'm curious how they're gonna roll that out, pre-raid, like, if we're gonna have all of the brand new dungeons to do on Mythic Zero as well as the 4 old ones. If that's the case, that's a lot of gearing potential going into the raid, um, or if they're just gonna do, like, I don't know, maybe all 8 available first before the raid, and then once the raid launches, then it goes into the season and you get, like, the 4 old, 4 new. How do you guys think that might
Mm.
play out?
I think the way it worked for Dragonflight was that all 8 Dragonflight dungeons were actually available on Mythic Zero initially, but
Yep.
Mythic Plus was not available, right?
Right. And then once they
Yes.
swapped
And
over to Mythic Plus, it was a little different. Well, no, no,
well,
no. It
once
was
Mythic
just the
Plus
Uh,
new
is available,
raids.
Mythic
Just the new
Zero is
raids.
just
yeah.
irrelevant, I guess. Like
Yeah.
the item we get there doesn't really matter that much
So
anymore.
so it's going to be different no matter what because they've stated that you'll get the mythic zeros and the new ones. The way I kind of see it is I imagine that they're probably going to let us do normal and heroic for all the war within dungeons. And then whenever you try to go into mythic zero, it's only going to be eligible for the ones that are going to then turn into mythic plus once the heroic week begins. That's how I'd expect it to
Right.
happen at least.
Yeah, because Mythic Zero is considered, like, part of the Mythic Plus track, essentially.
Yeah, I will say
Mhm.
like, and this is obviously like very specific, but as someone who writes guides and makes guide content around this stuff, I kind of appreciate it because it's a little bit less complicated to try and explain to
Yep.
people what to do and where you need to get it, the gear. So I feel like maybe it's like more intuitive to do it this way. But we'll have to see how they actually, do the implementation here because I think we just don't know yet.
Yeah. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about, the current state of WoW, With the new systems that we have with crests and flight stones and a whole upgrade system, do you guys feel that gearing has sort of accelerated and become a quicker process than it was in the past? And is that a good or a bad thing? Nagura, what do you think?
Yeah, it's difficult. I personally, I'm not a fan of the gearing process. Like, no matter what they do, I feel like I'm always just like, it's for me, it's like a means to an end because I want to be geared to like best in slot, and then I want to play in plus and I want to raid, right? But I know that a lot of people play the game for the process, for the gearing process, and they appreciate it when it's more interesting, when you have to do these things and like it drops. And for me, I'd rather just buy everything with a currency in a vendor, or like I upgrade my
Yeah.
things with my crest or whatever. So it's I understand that there's very, very different opinions when it comes to gear acquisition, because the only thing that every WoW player has in common is that they all want items and gear, right? While all of the other interests might be different, gear and gear acquisition is something that everyone cares about. So I know it's very difficult to figure out for Blizzard. And I do think that this the upgrade system that they implemented, to me, like I think it's a great success because most people are really happy about it. That you can get their crest no matter what content you do. Initially, of course, it was very complicated, and people like, how does this work? What kind of track? Like blah blah blah. It was very like overwhelming. But once you understood it and once you played a little bit around it, I think it really makes sense that you can just get your upgrades no matter, or the kind of content you do gives you the crests that are related to your gear, and
Yeah.
then you just go and upgrade it, right? So I think that worked out really well. I personally like it a lot too. Sometimes, of course, the amount of crests you got and like the upgrades you could do was a little bit off. So they had to figure out like a perfect kind of like tuning, what or whatever they have to do to not make it like too much gear initially and also not too little. But they had, I feel like, enough time now to figure it out. So I do think for the War Within, it should be perfect. And I also liked it for season 4, they increased the amount of quests you can farm because, of course, in a real season, so being able to farm more makes sense. So yeah, I personally, I'm a fan of it. The one thing that I was not a fan of in Dragonflight was like these super rare items
Yeah.
that
Yes.
yeah, they're like higher item level and they're like really good. Felt like half legendaries kind of thing that everyone wanted. That I'm not a fan of. But the upgrade system, that is something that I liked a lot, and I'm glad they're moving on with it into the next expansion too.
Yeah, I think the crest upgrade system, it was like way too good at the start whenever they first implemented it because they didn't quite know where they needed to set it. So we just like blasted through. But now they actually have it like pretty well set up. And I 100% agree with you with the vendor thing. I miss like back in the day because I used to play WoW like in TBC and Wrath of the Lich King, how there was always like a vendor that you could use outside of Season 4 to buy certain pieces. And that was so nice. It may not have been like completely optimal. It might have not been like the exact piece you need for your best in slot, but it would be like pretty close. So you had alternatives that were deterministic. And that's the most important thing, is that you didn't have to run 40, 50 dungeons in a row to try and get this one trinket that's like astronomically better than the other ones. I'll give you an example of this right now. So if you go do the Dawn of the Infinite and you do hard mode, Deathless, the trinket that drops off the last boss, the mirror trinket, is can go all the way up to 528. So some classes actually have this as their best in slot trinket for season 4. I know Hunter specifically wants this trinket like very badly. And they have to go do Deathless mythic hard mode version of this dungeon, which is actually insane. Like, I don't know if you've done the hard mode, but it's really hard. Like, there's a lot of damage
It
going
is.
out. Even with gear, it's like Deathless is kind of challenging. So like, I don't understand why that item just isn't on the bullion vendor, because it's not. You can't get the mirror on the bullion vendor. The only way to get it is through this dungeon. So I feel like maybe they should add it to the vendor. But I would love to see that vendor, maybe not the exact version we have right now, but like a nerf version just across the entire expansion. Because like you said, these very rare items, chasing these items throughout the entire expansion, obviously it keeps people engaged and it keeps people involved, and it's something to always aspire for, right? It's like the gambling part of our brain is like, oh, maybe I'll get this big win today,
Yeah.
right? So it's like tickling our brain there, making us feel good about ourselves whenever we get it. But also it just really sucks whenever you go the entire season without it, and it's like a necessary item to do the most damage you can. So
Yeah.
I would just love
Yeah.
to be able to like put my work towards it, as opposed to having to just pull the arm on the slot machine until it finally drops for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you brought up. Like, I think I mean, the reason why we have these RNG drops and these super rare items, like, is clearly because Blizzard wants us to have this feeling in our brain where we keep logging in. It's like, maybe this time I get it. Maybe this ID, I get my legendary, I get my trinket, I get my whatever. And like keeps people logging back in because of
Yeah.
this like RNG, this gambling aspect. But I do think it has like there's a line that has to be drawn somewhere and for me, the one thing that whenever I think about these things is the withered gym tree, like the Arcana Crystal.
Yeah.
Like that one was like the worst example of Blizzard not giving in, where they could have just nerfed the trinket or done whatever, and they're like, no, you have to wait however many weeks for this world boss to spawn so you can have a chance of getting this trinket, maybe. And that was just absolutely horrible. It was also like super over budget for its item level too.
Yeah. Good old
Sometimes
Jim.
they're just really stubborn because they know it's a thing, and then
Hmm.
the bigger we make it as a community, the more they like it because the more it actually like works out in like in that regards of us like wanting to log back in and trying it, right? So I do think that I understand there needs to be some RNG with items and with drops, otherwise it gets boring. But don't make it like super best in slot. And if you don't have the item, you're doing like 5% less damage or something like that. Just makes no sense.
Yeah. Or like if you've done X amount of the dungeon, maybe there's a small currency where it's like, okay, I've run this dungeon 35 times. I've acquired my 35 wish bones. I can go pay for the item, right? Because it drops
Yeah,
from that
maybe,
dungeon.
yeah.
So I feel like even if it was like insanely hard to farm it up, as long as there's like an end goal in sight, as long as I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, kind of like the bad luck protection for the legendaries, then I will feel much better about doing those 35 dungeons. Because if you just do them natty and you never get it, you're like, dude, I could be doing this for like 70 dungeons and maybe I won't get it still, right? You start dooming. So I feel like there's a balance. They definitely have to walk a line on that. But having some path to deterministic loot would be really nice.
Or, you go the path that you did preheat and you make a million evokers trying to get a legendary.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to force your luck, man.
I don't
I
know
did
how
that
much
too
money you spent on that.
in Legion too, like with the legendary system, right? Because in Legion you would get a legendary, and
Right.
then like you had a higher chance of getting your first one and then your second one, but then there were a million. And initially legendaries were completely imbalanced.
Yeah.
So some legendaries were like a 20% damage increase, and others were literally zero. Like it was actually worse than another item.
Hmm.
So I remember having 4 druids just because I wanted to get the best slot legendary. I ended up getting it on my main anyway, which was
Yeah.
super lucky. But the fact that you have to like gamble and like level multiple druids or multiple characters to make sure that one of them gets like super insane upgrade, it shouldn't be that way.
The path to getting the loot should never be the easiest way is to just make a new character, right? Like that should never be like the easiest way to cheese the loot. So yeah, I agree with that. Moving on, obviously we've been doing raids this entire expansion, Mythic Plus, and we've gotten to see how Blizzard has iterated on private auras and how they're trying to address weak auras. I know obviously a lot of players have a lot of different opinions on this. Some people feel like add-ons just play the game for you. Other people feel like add-ons are necessary because the fight mechanics aren't intuitive enough. I'd like to hear from you. Like, how do you feel about the current encounter design? And do you feel like they've hit the mark with private auras, or maybe they've gone too far? Just your general thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think add-ons is like a very interesting topic. I personally do think that like if we could live in a world like in an alternate universe where add-ons were never allowed in World of Warcraft, then I would actually prefer to live in that world. The thing is, we don't have that. Like it's not actually a possibility. The only possibility we have right now is removing add-ons from a game that existed with add-ons for such a long time that, in my opinion, it's not really possible to change the game around not having add-ons, at least not quickly, right? You can't just say all of a sudden, okay, no add-ons, right? Like that doesn't work. Because everyone has to adapt. Like the players need to adapt, but also the developers, because they have to figure out how to design bosses, how to design fights without add-ons in mind, which is of course something that they said numerous times, that they're designing everything with add-ons in mind, right? Which makes sense considering that they're allowed. So I do think that it has been getting a little bit out of control with some of the weak eras. In the past too, but now with the Race to World First being such a big thing, and it being like broadcast and so many people watching, I do think add-ons and weak auras became a lot more like required from like an average Mythic guild and an average player. Just like, you join in a plus dungeon and people are like, do you have this weak aura? Do you have this? And like people feel overwhelmed by it, which I totally understand. And not only is it overwhelming, but it's also like it creates a barrier of entry
Yeah.
for players that are new, and that and also it's just like you want to play a video game, you don't want to sit there and like research add-ons and figure out your UI and like play around blah 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 forever, because that is like work. It feels like work, right? And for someone who plays WoW a lot, it's maybe fine. It's like a necessary evil to have like a perfect UI the way you want it. But for someone that doesn't play as much, it's just extra time and effort that you don't want to put in. You just want to play the game. And it's a very similar thing with theory crafting as well, but that's like another story. I guess we do have a lot of access to that. But yeah, so I do think that add-ons in general are probably bad for the game. But we, as I said, we can't live in this alternate universe where they don't exist. So do you think whatever Blizzard is doing, they're trying this approach where they slowly like cut back on what add-ons can do, which they are doing like a so-so job at. We all know the private Uyghur issues with the bosses that we had in the past. I do think if they improve on whatever they're trying to do and like cutting back on Uyghurs and cutting back on add-ons is a good idea by them. I just think they have to make sure that they're doing it in such a way that it doesn't feel horrible, because otherwise people are just going to hate whatever Blizzard is doing, and they're going to be like, "Stop it! No one asked you to do this. Just keep letting us do with that as whatever we want to, and just stop whatever you're doing." Right. So I think cutting back, in my opinion, is good. Just do it in like a better way so people don't hate whatever your process is.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is just making the mechanic intuitive just at a glance. And I think that they've done really good with certain mechanics on this, like Calandris bombs is a great example where
Yeah.
it's like very obvious what is happening here. And then there's others where it's like not obvious at all. And it's like, how do you even do this without a weak aura? I don't understand what they're thinking here. But obviously that's like a product of the cat and mouse game that they're playing with the weak aura developers. And it almost seems like the more they try to restrict it, the crazier the weak auras get in return. Like they're making these insane weak auras that do stuff like, obviously they already got rid of the map stuff, but that was like probably the most egregious example I think we've ever seen. So yeah, I agree. It's like add-ons not great, but also you already gave them to us. You can't take them
Yeah.
away now because we already got them. So it's like too late for that. Because a big part of why people like WoW now is because you can customize your UI, and that kind of ties into this whole thing. So
You think so? Like, do you think that's actually a big reason why people play WoW?
oh yeah, a lot of people I speak to who play WoW, they cite like the ability to customize your UI as part of the reason why they like this MMO more than other MMOs.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously there's like varying levels. Like some people just want to go away, go download the top one, and then just slap it in there and go, right? But yeah, class design, mechanics of the bosses, these are all cases where maybe there are things that aren't exactly clear, and they're working on it. Like they're trying to improve the UI, but if it's not obvious, then you kind of have to make your own tracker for it. So you end up just using weak auras. This has been like kind of an issue on the alpha for me because there's certain things I want to track where I'm like, oh man, if I could just get a weak aura for this, I would be able to know this proc. And then as mage, I'm like tracking like 8 different buffs. I have my buff bar like massive, like above my character frame. I'm like darting between the buffs with my eyes, trying to figure out which stacks I have of which and what I need to press next. And it's just like, come on, just give me a weak aura, man.
Yeah, that's something. That's why I specifically asked in my like dev interview about this one thing they said. Like a long time ago, Asmongold had an interview with the Ian, and they talked about this whole add-on thing and the weaker thing, and that they're changing the UI. This was before Dragonflight, and Ian specifically said that the resource bar in the future should be somewhat similar to like weak auras, where you can customize what kind of buffs you're seeing on them. So you would be able to have a buff bar, but you pick and choose like a blacklist or a whitelist on what you see, even from other people's buffs like Pain Step or whatever, or PI and whatnot. And I think that is something that might actually have some people just remove weak auras and just
Yeah.
play with that. More casual players, of course, because you still need weak auras for loads of other things. But that would already help a lot. And I do think that one of the biggest downsides of add-ons existing is that, like for content creators like us, people join our stream and they don't know what is going on because
Yeah.
they don't know the add-ons, the position of everything is weird, and they cannot follow what we're doing, even if it's the most obvious to me as a player because it's my UI. And same goes for watching any kind of esport
Yeah.
or any like race to world first, even you're just watching and you don't see what's going on because the UI is so different for every player, and it takes you a long time to even realize where you're supposed to look for the different kind of things. So if the UIs would be more standardized and we wouldn't have add-ons, then that would already help a lot for like the player, like the
The
barrier of
viewing
entry for
experience.
players
Yeah.
and the viewing experience, which I do think would be a good thing. But yeah, hard to change whatever we have now. It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of locked in. I will say though, I really liked some of the creative solutions that like Waveform folks who or other teams who have done production for the Race World First have done for the UI to try and give viewers like a global kind of experience for like here's HP bar, here's these battle reses, the other cooldowns. I think that there's been a lot of really creative solutions to that. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do think it would be an interesting thing if we could have something like that even for Twitch, like in general, as like overlays. So maybe like, of course, I would have to work with World of Warcraft, but maybe if we could remove our add-ons visually, right? So I see my add-ons, but
Yeah.
a person is watching my stream sees a different like layout.
That'd be so
That would
cool.
be
That would
cool,
actually be
actually.
really, really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have to be worked together with Twitch and then Warcraft and see what they could do. That would be perfect in my opinion.
Yeah, because from a viewer perspective, there's not that immediate familiarity and recognizable sort of thing when you're watching, so many other people with fully customized UIs. Um, but like, it's tough because I feel like Blizzard has such a hard job to try to make a UI that appeals to so many different types of players. Like for us, who do kind of harder content, we want to be able to track our buffs and we need to see them sort of near the center of our screen, right? But by default, the buff bar is up in the top right. But the fact that you even have to go up with the default UI, if you wanted to use that, to go up there and like customize it, make the buffs bigger, pull them down to like the middle, there's already that roadblock. So I feel like it's such a hard job for them to balance it between the casuals and the higher end people. So you're never going to make a perfect UI.
I think you could expand that and say that just Blizzard has a pretty much impossible job pleasing people in general, because I
Mhm.
feel like the player
Yep.
base in this game is like extremely tuned to be negative and skeptical about literally anything. Like even if they do something great, the even before you get your hands on it, people will just be like overly negative about it. It kind
Yep.
of ties into like our next topic, which is like, okay, so like Plunderstorm came out. I know you have like a clip that went viral, Nagura, of you talking about the negativity in the community. I was having similar experiences in my stream. I was actually really hyped for Plunderstorm, talking about how this seems like really cool. I don't really like PvP, but like this really appeals to me. And I loved Plunderstorm, and I think it was really great, but it was just crazy how much overwhelming negativity there was, like from the jump. Like before we even got to click login, people are already like extremely doom and gloom. And I'd be interested to know, I mean, you kind of summarized it in your clip, but just kind of tell us about your feelings on the community and the toxic negativity, the skepticism that it seems like is just embedded in the World of Warcraft community.
Yeah, it's honestly, especially as I mean, as content creators, you see this negativity like all day, every day. And to me personally, I'm just a really optimistic person in general in real life as well. Like when it comes to anything. So for me, having all of this negativity, like it's really like just it's it's just so demotivating, right? And it's like it puts your mood down every time you see people just be so negative about everything. So I always try to see the good in almost everything. And I always try to think logically. It's like, okay, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Right? Why is Blizzard doing this? Why are they doing that? Like they cannot realistically speaking doing this, like they cannot do something only to make their players miserable, right? Like there's just no way Blizzard sits down. It's like, what can we do today that people hate?
Except
Like
for
obviously
Augmentation
that's not
Invoker.
yeah,
True.
except that. But there's obviously a lot of people that think that is true. Like there's people that think that Blizzard does everything just to spite their player base and that they do everything just for I don't know what their goal would be in that case. But yeah, so this overwhelming negativity, I think it's very difficult. And I do also want to say that of course there's a reason why people are so negative, right? Like obviously this doesn't come out of nowhere. Like the players certainly have been let down numerous times by Blizzard, and the the games develop like it definitely has been shifting towards like this more corporate style thing where they're more out for money and they want to they have these like quarterly things they need to hit and yearly I don't know like making sure they get this much revenue, and obviously it's a big corporation that needs to do things for their investors and whatnot and for their shareholders, and understand that that has a bad influence on the game. But I do think that what people don't see sometimes is that is something that we cannot necessarily change as a player, but the people that work for Blizzard, like the developers and people that work, like they're not the higher ups, they're not the shareholders, not the CEOs. They actually, I do think, I know a lot of them, they do actually do care about the game a lot. And they're trying their best and they're passionate about Warcraft still. Some people think that the CEOs are the ones that are coding the game. Like there's this one person that works at Blizzard, codes everything, right? And they're simultaneously also the CEO and to make $1 trillion every year. But yeah, so I do think that there's humans that work at Blizzard that are still very much passionate about the game, and people should be focusing on that. And whenever there's something that gets added to the game that is, in your opinion, not something that you wanted, you do also have to make sure that you think about the fact that there are so many different kinds of players that maybe actually do want whatever Blizzard is adding. Because every WoW player, in my opinion, thinks that they are the center of the universe, and whatever they want is what everyone wants. And a lot of people think this way because they surround themselves with people that also want similar things than them, which makes sense, right? So if you're a high-end and plus player, then all of your friends are also high-end and plus players. So of course, what you want is also what all of your friends in game want. Doesn't mean that every WoW player wants the same thing, right? So to be able to please everyone that plays World of Warcraft when we have so many different types of players, it's just this this huge game. It's almost like an abomination of a game at this point, where you have all of these like aspects that have this community that likes these aspects, but they don't like the other part of the game. So it's like I like it plus, but I don't like PvP, and I don't like pets, and I don't like transmogs, and I don't like achievements, right? So pleasing all of these kind of players is, in my opinion, an impossible task. Like it
Yeah.
actually just doesn't work. And as a player, I think you have to be a little bit like you have to accept that you're not the center of the universe, and that this is just how an MMO works, and there are different aspects, right? And you just sometimes have to accept that and be a little bit more open about the changes, and not like doom and gloom them immediately as they come. And sometimes something might just not be for you, right? Sometimes Blizzard might do a change and this is not aimed at you as a player, but at somebody else that also plays WoW, and you just have to accept that, right? I think people are just a little bit entitled when it comes to game changes, and they think that everything has to be around, like catered to them. And this whole like 1% versus 99% is also another issue where I think
Yeah.
that people think this is literally true. Like people think there's a 1%, and that the 99% of the rest of the players, they all have the same interests, when that is obviously not true at all. It's not 1% and 99. It's more like there's 4% that like this, and then there's 10% that like this, and then 20% this, and so on, right? It's not 1% and 99. There's obviously all different kinds of players, and they make up different percentages, and Blizzard has to think about all of them. So yeah, people have to be a little bit more logical and be a bit more open-minded, and I don't know, touch some grass, as I said.
The 99% thing, this reminds me of like the whole like, oh, they're designing the game for the high end and that's why it's bad. I feel like there's like, I'm not going to name or like call anyone specific, but I feel like there's kind of a weird financial incentive too to like make content around hating the game. Like, so it kind of drives certain content creators to just be like overly negative because that's like the community that they've built. For like you're talking about the echo chamber thing, right? If your entire community just wants to hear you talk shit about the game, that's what you're going to do because that's what your community came for, right? And especially if you have like a really big audience, a really big platform, that then has like a downstream effect on like the entire platform, right? Like if you have someone who's talking a lot of crap, the day it came out on Twitch, you'll see all the chatters coming in repeating the talking lines from wherever they heard them where someone was talking crap about it. And it's I feel like, you know, there's nothing we can really do about it except for just try to be ourselves, be true to ourselves and say how we feel about it and also address it. And I think you did a really good job in that clip of addressing the negativity and bringing up how this is really not something that people should be making decisions on right away. I mean, hey, get your hands on it, right? We can talk crap about it once you play it, but if it's not out yet, like, come on, man, just give them a chance. This is something completely new. It's a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old game, and they're trying new stuff like this. I think that's awesome. Honestly, and I think there's a lot of lessons that they can see in that content that they can bring over to the live game, and like there's new ways of approaching content and designing mechanics and rotations and abilities that they could get from Plunderstorm, and it actually enriches the game too. So I think it's like we have a vested interest in the game doing well, making content around it. I feel like we have to acknowledge that. But I also think that we as players have a vested interest in the game being good. So maybe don't just like jump the gun and say everything is bad before you see it, right? Give it a chance. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I had the same thing happen even recently with the hero talents, because Demon Hunter had a new hero talent tree released a couple days ago. And, there were some big streamers that reviewed it immediately on their stream and said things like, oh, this is boring, it's uninspired or whatever. So when I was streaming, I would get people coming into my stream, and the first thing they said to me was, okay, how shit is this? It's like, well, give it a chance, man. You haven't even logged in and tried to play it. You haven't even looked at the talents and pressed the buttons yourself. Like, there's definitely just this overwhelming sort of mob mentality of toxic negativity that's just seeping through the community, and it's something that I really, really hope goes in the other direction. But you try as a creator to help with that and be positive and give things the opportunity and the chance that they need to actually show the community that it could be good. But then you get just told that you're huffing copium.
Or
Like,
that Blizzard's
Yeah.
paying you. They're like, oh,
Yeah,
you're on
or-
their
yeah.
payroll. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is.
There's-
What can you
there's
do,
no
right?
winning.
Yeah.
That's one thing I wanted to mention as well is I think partially like the reason why this negativity works so well for content creators too, as you said, like sometimes they're even like I even want to say sometimes they're more negative than they really feel just because it works so well and it
Yep.
gets such a big audience. And I think the big reason for that is that I think a viewer by default thinks that you're more genuine and more honest if you're being negative about something rather than being positive, especially if they don't necessarily agree with you immediately, right? So if they think something is bad or they have like a bad attitude towards it, and then someone says something good about it, there's like, oh, there must be an alternative reason why this is something good. It cannot
Yeah.
be an honest opinion. But if someone says something bad about something, then they immediately think, oh, this must be honest because there's no reason they would be negative without anything, right? Without a reason, right? So I think people don't associate like getting more viewers and this negativity actually being good content with negativity in general. So they think, okay, perfectly genuine, perfectly honest, this person, they get it. And any person that is positive, they like immediate chill or immediate like Blizzard is paying them or whatever. And I think that is something that people should sit down and have a think about. Like negativity can also be like be beneficial to like the content creator, right? And it
Yeah.
could also just be a lie. It could
Yep.
be ingenuine as well.
I would argue there's a far greater financial incentive to be negative than there is to be positive in this
I
game
agree, actually, yeah.
specifically.
In this game, yes.
Yeah.
That's just something to think about. But yeah, so we got to get ready for raid here, but appreciated the time to talk about all these topics. So for the viewers, we will have our UI improvement of the week. That's going to be included in the video once it goes up on YouTube. But let's go ahead and get going with the sign off. So my name is Preheat. Thank you again for watching the Warcraft workshop. Keep in mind that our podcasts are now also going to be on Spotify, so you can go check us out there. We'll have the links in the description below. You can always follow us on Twitter as well. But this is me signing off. And Jedith?
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. It's always a fun time. And Nagura, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, hopefully we can get you back on the pod sometime soon. And yeah, if you want to say anything to the audience before we let you go.
Obviously, thanks for watching this podcast and thanks for having me. And yeah, thanks for the invite.
Do you have any plugs as well?
Buff Moonkin.
Okay.
Nice.
I like that. All right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, as always, the episode will be uploaded once we have it live. But thanks again for having the chat. We'll see you soon.